Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. It's monitor review time, and today we're checking out the LG 27GP850. Remember the 27GL850, one of the most popular 1440p IPS gaming monitors of the last few years? Well, the 27GP850 is its true successor, a much more substantial update to the display than last year's refreshed 27GN850, a monitor we didn't even bother reviewing, with LG having a clear goal in mind to retake the performance throne in this class of monitor. The basic fundamentals here are the same. It's a 27-inch 2560 by 1440 display using LG Nano IPS technology. Same 98% DCI-P3 gamut coverage, same adaptive sync support with G-Sync and AMD FreeSync, but there are three major feature additions here that make this more than just a refresh of what LG were offering previously. One is a higher refresh rate. It's listed as a 165Hz monitor with an overclock up to 180Hz, up from 144Hz previously. It's still a medium to high refresh rate monitor, but a higher refresh rate is always better. Next, LG have optimized their Overdrive to increase performance and reduce overshoot, something we'll be able to measure shortly. It's still a 1 millisecond class monitor according to LG, but just a better 1 milliseconds. And finally, we also get full backlight strobing support for the first time in an LG-made Nano IPS monitor. All of this is being offered at the same price as the 27GL850, $500 US. I believe it's scheduled to go on sale in the next month or so in most regions. LG did provide us with this display for testing today a bit early, but it's still a final retail model that's ready to go. Design-wise, the 27GP850 is your standard LG Ultra Gear monitor. The standard's received an overhaul compared to the 27GL850, so we're not getting the sliding cylinder design for height adjustability, but the new version here is quite similar to LG's 2020 series monitors. So the stand pillar and base use plastic for their outer materials. It's got this new, more angular pillar that I think looks quite good, and then V-shaped legs. Overall adjustability is decent. The range of height adjustability in particular is generous, so it should be great for most users' ergonomic setup, and this is achieved with less wobble than their prior generation design. There's also tilt and pivot support as well, just in case you want to use the monitor in a portrait orientation. I also quite like how easy it is to access the 27GP850's ports on the rear, where you'll find a display port, two HDMI connectors, and a couple of USB ports. This does complicate wall mounting the monitor somewhat. This display does have a VESA mount, but I feel the ease of access is worth it. The overall redesign is quite nice as well. I'm glad LG hasn't changed it substantially from previous monitors. As for the on-screen display, it's controlled through LG's usual directional toggle along the bottom edge of the display. LG have revamped the design here to give it a more cool aesthetic, I guess you'd say, but the functionality and the layout is largely unchanged. You'll find features here like crosshairs to help you cheat, black boosting modes, an FPS display, which I always find handy, and the usual range of picture controls. I tend to find LG's monitor OSDs quite easy to use, and the customizable quick access controls are a nice bonus. Time for the all-important response time numbers and a look at panel performance. LG offers 4 overdrive settings here, and we'll work our way through all of them. As a quick reminder, we've updated our testing methodology for 2021 to be more accurate, and you can learn more about the metrics we're using in the updated video linked in the description below. First up, we have performance in the off mode, which is without overdrive. As expected, we get virtually no overshoot, and we can see that native panel performance is around the 7.8 millisecond mark on average. This is actually a very good result all things considered, but does fall short of what is required for a true 180Hz refresh rate, so it might be time to enable overdrive. When using the normal mode, at 180Hz performance does improve noticeably compared to overdrive disabled, and LG has achieved this without increasing overshoot. A 6.5 millisecond grade-to-gray average response time is in line with several other IPS monitors, but we can do better than this. Let's increase the overdrive up to fast. In this mode, we really start to see the benefits of LG's Nano IPS technology and the additional tuning they have done with the new 27GP850. We get a response time average of 4.65 milliseconds, which is fast, and that allows for 82% refresh rate compliance at 180Hz, impressive given our new and much stricter testing methods. Inverse ghosting has increased slightly, but it's not noticeable in practice, and this leads to a great cumulative deviation result of 407. Like with LG's previous display, there is also a crazy fast faster mode, which is designed specifically to hit a 1 millisecond response time. The best result we achieved here is 1.25 milliseconds, so that claim is accurate. Cumulative deviation is higher in this mode compared to the previous mode, indicating the bounce of performance has swung too far into the inverse ghosting zone. Back to the fast mode now to assess performance across the refresh range. In this overdrive mode, LG are keeping the average response time around 4.5 to 4.8 milliseconds across all refresh rates, with the only factor that's changing being the level of overshoot. At high refresh rates above 100Hz, the inverse ghosting rate is solid and makes it unlikely you'll spot bright ghost trails while retaining very fast response times. Cumulative deviation at these refresh rates is generally around 500 or below, which is pretty good. When we get down a bit lower than 100Hz, we do start to see more inverse ghosting, and this is somewhat noticeable at 85 and 60Hz as the inverse ghosting rate is approaching 30%. So at these lower refresh rates, we still have great response times, but moderate levels of inverse ghosting. In contrast, the normal mode is about 1.5 milliseconds slower across the board in terms of response times, but does so with almost no overshoot at all refresh rates tested. When looking specifically at cumulative deviation, which highlights that bounce between speed and overshoot, the crossover point where normal is better than fast is around 100Hz. That is to say, gamers looking to play mostly at high refresh rates should choose the fast mode, while those playing at lower refreshes should use normal. Now, the ideal solution here would have been to implement variable overdrive to switch between these settings depending on the refresh rate, but LG hasn't implemented that here. In a sense, there are two optimal overdrive modes rather than the ideal situation, which is a single optimal setting. However, I also think that's being a bit unfair to LG. Usually when I talk about displays not delivering a single overdrive mode experience, it's because each mode is unusable at a certain point in the refresh range. That could mean decent performance at 144Hz, but severe inverse ghosting at 60Hz. That's not really the case with the 27GP850, and the differences between the normal and fast modes are small overall. I actually found it quite hard to decide which mode is better for adaptive sync gaming. Ultimately, I settled on the fast mode, but overall it's a case where buyers can choose to use or either prioritize low overshoot with the normal mode or speed with the fast mode and get a pretty good experience across the board. The big question though is, how does the 27GP850 compare to other monitors on the market, and specifically, how well does it compare to the 27GL850? Well, when talking about the best performance on offer at the maximum refresh rate, the 27GP850 comes out looking very strong. This newly tweaked display offers performance in line with other current generation fast IPS products and a step above the 27GL850. Overshoot remains about the same as the 27GL850 here, but the new model is 24% faster, plus we're getting the added benefit of 180Hz versus 144Hz, which does improve clarity as well. Average grade-to-grade performance measured across the refresh range is also an interesting story. The inverse ghosting rate is higher here than with the 27GL850, but it also provides a 30% faster response time on average. In general, this makes it a bit faster on average than other current-gen fast IPS panels like those found in the MAG274QRF-QD, AW2721D, and the PG329Q. When looking at cumulative deviation, we do see an improvement for the 27GP850. It now sits firmly among those new IPS panels we've just been talking about, although not generationally ahead. In comparison, last-gen versions like the 27GL850, S2721DGF, and AG273QXP all sit in the 580 to 540 range in this metric. So the 27GP850's result of 521 is in the range of 5 to 10% better. Not a huge improvement, but decent for what appears to just be overdrive tweaks rather than an entire overhaul of LG's IPS technology, and it's doing this without variable overdrive. While the 27GP850's performance across these metrics is either the best or among the best of the IPS monitors I've tested, particularly around its refresh rate, it's still ultimately beaten by the Samsung Odyssey G7. Now granted, these aren't the same class of monitor. The Odyssey is 40% more expensive and is more of a flagship product with its 240Hz refresh rate, but there is still that gap to the best you can get today if you are willing to pay the price. And as a reminder, the Odyssey provides this performance without much dark level smearing. Dark level performance is in the realm of the 27GP850 despite using VA technology, so Samsung continues to impress here. At a fixed 120Hz, the 27GP850 is a very fast monitor and competes favourably with other displays. Like we've talked about before, at the same level of overshoot, the 27GP850 is 18% faster than the AG273QXP, which uses LG's previous nano IPS design, and quite a bit faster than the 27GL850, although with more overshoot. At 60Hz using the normal overdrive mode, the 27GP850 and 27GL850 deliver roughly the same performance, the 27GP850 with a bit less overshoot. It seems that most of the improvements made this generation are at higher refresh rates. Input latency is very low. Processing lag, the measure of how quickly the display takes an input and begins showing it on the screen, is under 0.5 milliseconds, which is as good as other monitors. However, it's also backed up with a high refresh rate, which reduces refresh latency compared to older 144Hz monitors, and then with fast response times factored in, total latency is below 8 milliseconds, so this is about 30% better than the 27GL850, comparing best versus best. Power consumption has decreased slightly across the generations. The 27GP850 consumes about 16% less power at the same level of brightness after calibration as the 27GL850, a modest improvement to efficiency, but not that different to some other 27-inch 1440p gaming monitors that I've benchmarked. The 27GP850 allows you to run backlight strobing between a fixed 165Hz and 100Hz in this mode, and the results are okay without being amazing. A 165Hz motion clarity is improved, but red fringing is still present like with other nano IPS panels that backlight strobe, and there's also a faint double image. The red fringing issue is caused by a slow red phosphor in LG's wide gamut backlight they use for their nano IPS panels. The issue is minimized compared to the ViewSonic XG270QG, which also allowed backlight strobing, but it is still visible to some degree. How noticeable this is to you in games will depend on your sensitivity to artifacts. I'd say it's worth experimenting with, but overall it's only a mediocre experience in my opinion. For example, if we show the MSI MAG274QRF-QD's backlight strobing feature in a side-by-side comparison, you can clearly see the difference in clarity. The 27GP850 actually has better clarity than the MSI when both are not strobing, but the MSI monitor is better in its AMB mode. You'll also spot more red fringing with the 27GP850 as you decrease the refresh rate, which is something to keep in mind. Alright, moving into color performance now. Unlike LG's previous nano IPS displays, the 27GP850 also comes with a rated 98% DCI P3 coverage, which you're now testing measured in at 96%, among the best coverage of P3 that we've measured. To compare this result to other monitors, we can convert this result into Rec 2020 coverage, with this color space being massive and much larger than P3. Here we can see a good result for the 27GP850 with about 70% Rec 2020 coverage, being similar to many other displays that prioritize wide P3 color gamuts. However, the most recent wide gamut IPS displays like MSI's MAG274QRF-QD take things one step further with in excess of 80% Rec 2020 coverage. This allows the MSI monitor to also support full Adobe RGB coverage, which the 27GP850 does not. Having Adobe RGB coverage in addition to P3 may be useful for some creative workloads, so if that's important to you, then other panels will be better than the 27GP850. Despite this, LG is still providing quite a wide gamut. Factory calibration is average. The results are a bit problematic in that gamma drops off quite a bit at the high end rather than sticking to the ideal near 2.2 value, and white balance on my unit was slightly tinted blue out of the box, so this led to a moderately high delta E grayscale result. Then we look at saturation and color checker. We also do see high delta E numbers as the 27GP850 does not clamp to an sRGB gamut out of the box. This causes oversaturation as evidenced by what we're seeing here. When we compare this to other displays, the results are mid-table for both color checker and grayscale factory calibration. Pretty typical for a wide gamut gaming monitor, but not amazing and not indicative of any attention to detail on the part of LG. However, in a big positive for this display, LG do provide a proper sRGB emulation mode which you can access in the display settings. This is one way to achieve more accurate results for everyday PC usage. I would describe the sRGB mode as average to good. It does work for clamping the gamut and it does allow brightness adjustment, however it locks down grayscale control, so we can't fine-tune the results. My unit had a decently accurate sRGB mode calibrated at the factory with Delta E2000 results for saturation and color checker below 2.0. However, grayscale was a touch off. good adherence to the gamma curve, but a slight red tint from a wonky CCT average. Despite this, I would recommend using the sRGB mode if you want a more accurate experience from OSD tweaks. From here, the next step really is a full calibration, which we achieved using DisplayCal, and you can download the ICC profile we created if you are a Hardware Unboxed supporter through Patreon or Floatplane. As expected, sRGB results are very strong, and for P3 it's also quite good aside from some very small problems right at the tip of the gamut where the last 2 to 4% isn't covered. Brightness is improved with the 27GP850 compared to the 27GL850. The new model does around 450 nits compared to 350 nits with the prior generation, so that's a very solid improvement that will assist those in bright environments. Minimum brightness is outstanding at below 30 nits, great for those that like a dim monitor for gaming at night. The big story around LG's nano IPS panels has always been the contrast ratio. Unfortunately, LG have not been able to shift the needle significantly with this new generation. The 27GP850 in my testing had an 835:1 contrast ratio after calibration, better than the 27GL850 I initially reviewed, but no better than other monitors that use this panel like the Dell S2721 DGF. This means weak black levels, and that may be a problem for those that prefer gaming in darker rooms. Not all nano IPS panels have such a low contrast ratio. It's much better on the 4K version, for example, but the 27-inch 1440p model remains poor. Viewing angles are still excellent, so while the 27GP850 may have TN-like contrast, it does offer a much better viewing experience overall. Uniformity on my unit was good without being amazing, not too different from the 27GL850. There was a bit of IPS glow with my model, although not as much as with my 27GL850, and this does tend to vary from unit to unit, so whatever I report here may not be what you experience yourself. And finally, I'll talk about HDR performance. While the 27GP850 has received Display HDR 400 certification and does support HDR inputs, it fundamentally lacks the hardware required for proper HDR, like a full array local dimming backlight. So I wouldn't think of this as an HDR monitor in your buying decision. Overall, LG continues to provide impressive monitors in the gaming market. What was most pleasing to me when reviewing the 27GP850 is that this isn't just a basic re-release of the 27GL850. Instead, LG have assessed the market, noted that some newer IPS monitors were offering better performance, and stepped up their game with their 2021 27-inch 1440p monitor refresh. This has led to several improvements over the prior model. Notably, response time performance is better. Depending on the metric and refresh rate tested, the 27GP850 is anywhere from roughly 5 to 25% faster than the 27GL850. Combined with a higher refresh rate at 180Hz, this new display has visibly superior motion clarity and lower input latency. And to be clear, it doesn't need that higher refresh rate to be better. Even comparing 144Hz to 144Hz, the 27GP850 is better in terms of response performance, a product of LG's better tweaked overdrive modes. And LG needed this because in the past year or so, we've seen other fast IPS panels hit the market, like the AU Optronics panel seen in MSI's MAG274 QF-QD, offering a step above the older 27GL850 in performance. The new 27GP850 is able to, at worst, match these newer panels, or at best beat them in motion performance, so it's good to see LG take a step forward here. The addition of backlight strobing is also welcome. It's not the best version of this that I've seen, but at least it's available here, which you couldn't say for the prior generation model. While improving motion clarity and input latency, LG have kept pretty much everything else the same. This means the same great wide gamut experience, same great viewing angles, same sort of factory calibration, and unfortunately, the same contrast ratio, which remains a weak spot for LG's offering. We do get higher brightness and a refreshed design though. To me, a major selling point of the 27GP850 is also its proper functional sRGB emulation mode, which eliminates oversaturation when viewing standard content like YouTube videos or games. Many wide gamut monitors stuff this up, and you have no choice but to view an oversaturated image in some instances. So full praise to LG here for thinking of both gaming performance and color accuracy and executing well in both areas. All up, I think the 27GP850 is a great monitor, but the question remains, should you pay $500 US for it? And that's honestly a tricky one because it's on the higher end of current medium refresh rate display pricing. The MSI MAG274 QF-QD and Dell S2721 DGF, for example, are typically found between $400 and $450, not to mention there's lower end models that you can buy as well, so is the extra cost worth it for LG's new model? In my opinion, the 27GP850 is the best in its class of the monitors I've tested, with a combination of great response times and a functional sRGB mode pushing it over the edge. I think generally it is worth the price premium, and its overall balance of features with few weak areas makes it a monitor you won't be disappointed to have. However, it is a close call. The MSI model, for example, is what I'd recommend if you want Adobe RGB support, higher contrast, or better backlight strobing at a lower price. However, its lack of sRGB emulation and worse peak performance than the 27GP850 doesn't make it the outright best in my opinion anymore. The S2721 DGF is still a great bang for buck choice as well, but it doesn't have the suite of features on offer here, given it's closer to the last gen 27GL850 overall. Either way, there are so many great options available to buy these days that you should be able to find something for your specific needs, and in many cases I think the 27GP850 will be ticking a lot of boxes, so it gets my recommendation. Anyway, that's it for my review of the LG 27GP850. I'll also be reviewing soon the 32-inch version of this monitor, the 32GP850, so you'll be able to check our results for that soon when we get that review up on the channel. As always, if you want to support our hardware unboxed testing, you can become a supporter of the channel via our links below to Patreon or Floatplane. You get access to things like our monthly live streams, behind the scenes videos, ICC profiles, all that good stuff. Thanks for watching. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one.